How y'all doing?
Howdy. It's been a bit. So sorry I've been gone for so long. I did do a couple live streams, which unfortunately I will not be able to do any live streams until Christmas due to my Wi-Fi. College Wi-Fi isn't that great. But yeah, I'm in college now. If you remember my last video, I was really worried about my financial situation and mental health stuff and all of that jazz. But I'm doing a lot better. College has been going great for me. I've actually improved my mental health significantly. I'm healing from my abusive household, which I'm going to be more open about since I no longer have that fear of everything being taken away if it's found out that I'm talking about it. Mainly because my grandfather has stepped into the situation and has basically primarily started to take care of me financially and emotionally, so I'm free from any suffocating feeling. Also, because I'm in a dorm, if you hear anything in the background that I can't edit out, sorry, I live with 4 people, and though I have my own room, the walls are super thin. Can't do much about it except record late at night and hope and pray that my roommates cannot hear what I'm saying through the walls. Hi if you can! I am considering making an update video discussing kind of how good things have been, some bad things that have happened, and etc. I mean, there was one situation that I prefer not to talk about, but occurred. I've been working really hard in college and also just on RoseVerse in general. I dropped chapter 4 if you're curious. It's the longest piece of fiction I've written in one sitting at a whopping 21k words for just one chapter. The reception on it has been really positive. I'm really happy with it, but I do see people on my YouTube asking where to read RoseVerse or to watch it. My AO3 will be linked in the description, so you'll be able to actually go read the fic and get caught up on the things that I'm going to be referencing. However, since the next chapter will be an ElseWhere chapter, I figured it would be a good time to actually start talking about what ElseWhere is, because I've been getting a lot of questions about that. Quick side note before we begin. Some quick self-promo. Please go follow my Tumblr, please! I post sneak peeks of videos on there. In fact, Tumblr got to see 2 of the references that I worked on in this video before this video dropped, so if you want to see more sneak peeks like that, then I highly suggest you go and see my Tumblr and check it out. I also answer questions and drop some lore hints that you normally wouldn't get on my Tumblr through Ask. I love answering Ask, it's my favorite thing in the world, and I've actually spoiled a couple bits of RoseVerse up there because anyone who follows my Tumblr is exclusive, so they get that sneak peek content. You can also ask questions about me, my VAs, anything that you can think of. I've gotten a couple of questions about my work ethic and also how I make videos and advice on project making. So if you have any questions like that, you want to know more about me, you want to ask some RoseVerse lore questions, learn more about character motives, see sneak peeks for RoseVerse and other content, get updates on my life and updates on things in general, please subscribe to my Tumblr. It is the easiest place for me to connect with my viewers and also see fan art from you guys that you can submit so I can add it to my fan art corner. It'll also be in my description. I'm really excited. I hope you go follow. It'll be worth it, I promise. So a lot of you might be asking, Rosa, what's ElseWhere? I've never heard that in the Undertale multiverse before. And also, who the hell is Corar? There already is one that exists, and they are nothing like the Corar that you keep posting about. Well, my dear viewer and big fan of RoseVerse and all things alike, I am here with the actual creator of ElseWhere to explain some things, featuring my older sister, Barnacle.
Hi, my name is Barnacle. I am Rosa's sister and also the co-writer of RoseVerse. My job is primarily to edit the stories, kind of the first beta reader, if you will, and I also have some world building contributions. I'm the creator of the concept of ElseWhere and Corar. So the question of what is ElseWhere has a lot of components to it, especially for someone who doesn't stop talking. So I'll try to separate it by like the origin of it, like the behind the scenes sort of conception of ElseWhere, and then I'll get into like what ElseWhere is thematically. So how it came about is that Rosa has a lot of hyperfixations, and I'm usually on the receiving end of them. And so whenever she gets really anthropological about like patterns in fandom, I get invested. And one of the things that we noticed is sort of the centralizing of Sans in a lot of the stories, which we thought made sense, right? I mean, like Sans is the character in the game that breaks the fourth wall. And so the idea of a multiverse being centered around him, like just that's really intuitive. But we also thought there were some holes in the kind of stories that people were telling that we wanted to tell ourselves and we wanted to address. More specifically, when Rosa started talking about the Omega timeline, I noticed that there weren't, besides Core Frisk, any Frisks or Karas, which was really peculiar to me because I thought that the Frisks and the Karas in the original game were kind of the central point of the story. And so to see them not be represented, I was like, where did the children go? And Rosa was like, oop, doesn't exist. And I was like, oh, okay. Especially because with the Star Sanses, there's sort of like that quote unquote good run, and with the bad Sanses, there's that quote unquote bad run. And I was like, well, where's the neutral run? So ElseWhere comes of that. It's kind of the smushing of like the neutrality to fill out the spectrum of the game, but also exploring the stories of the humans in these stories. I felt like Kara and Frisk represented an audience and the art that they consume and the way that they will warp a story in order to feel personally satisfied. And so when there's a plot about agency, having the self-insert character or the surrogate audience character who have their own names, who have their own backstories, not have a spotlight on them. I just thought it was a missed opportunity. So that's kind of where ElseWhere comes from, is exploring those sorts of ideas. In terms of what it is, ElseWhere is a secret place that Corar created in order to rectify what they thought was an imbalance of power, and an imbalance of who gets to be chosen to survive. When I heard about Core Frisk, the idea of having this forced empathy to see every single iteration of you was intriguing in the sense of Frisks are supposed to represent the extremes of mercy and what it means to forgive over and over and over again. And Kara's represents the extremes of retribution, what it means to basically take hold of your own justice and punish people because of the wrongs that they've committed. And so with Core Frisk kind of segregating who they think is safe enough to be in their domain, I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if there was a Core Kara and they found retribution and completely cutting themselves off from the idea that a storyline or a narrative has to be preserved. A lot of this war centers around like securing the intent of the authors, because the authors are the gods of this world. And so for Kara, she's like, all of our traumas and all of these cycles continue because we are keeping the peace of gods who don't care for us beyond the function that we as characters serve. How can our identity be based off of something when there is no choice in the matter? So there's this sort of extreme view of, well, if we can't survive outside of the story, maybe the story shouldn't exist at all. Maybe these timelines should just die because they aren't our timelines, they're their timelines. And we're simply just operating in them, we're just existing, we're not living. These children, these Karas and these Frisks, who are written to be the persecutors of a lot of these stories, why would you want them in the same place as other innocent civilians when they are liabilities? Like and I can't stress this enough, are murderers. They murder people, and they've murdered people like for thousands of years. So I don't blame Core Frisk for being like, yeah, I don't want literal killers next to these monsters. Like, why would let's keep the people safe. But Cora's stance is like they never even got a chance. They never got to grow beyond that. So, ElseWhere is where Corar takes these kids and basically rehabilitates them. She's like, I'm going to give you a city like environment. I'm gonna give you a place that's full of community, and I'm gonna give you a chance perpetually to try to find yourself again and again and again until you find a sense of peace enough to not hurt other people.
Wonderful explanation, Barnacle. You did phenomenal, as always. Now it's my time to shine, mainly because Corar in Barnacle's original multiverse is not the same as RoseVerse Corar. Corar in RoseVerse is a completely different character. In fact, canon Corar is a lot more of a trickster character, kind of like Peter Pan-esque, and ElseWhere is more like Neverland. However, in RoseVerse, it's more like an inpatient facility, and Corar is a lot more serious and tired, and the trope of child trying to be an adult for the other children around them. So Peter Pan, but a lot more serious. A lot of my problems that I faced in my old designs in all of RoseVerse was that I was very restrictive. You couldn't notice it too much with the Sanses because they were still different from their canon designs, however you could definitely notice it with the ElseWhere characters. Corar as a character is very, very kind, one of the kindest people you will meet, but she also lets herself get walked over. She's very protective of ElseWhere and the people inside of it, and believes that everyone deserves a second chance, no matter how brutal they can be. In her old design, she looked like a trickster. However, with the change of her character in RoseVerse and how much she's developed, she needed to look more different. I still wanted her to look human, especially since she fell into the core when she was still a ghost, so the impact on her body and such would be detrimental. Therefore, she does have the scar on her back from her body almost completely shattering from being in the core. However, she managed to get out of it, and much like Core Frisk, came to the conclusion of needing to help people after all that she saw. However, I still wanted to make her kind of look uncanny, not exactly like a human being. So I didn't give her a nose. I know that's kind of creepy to imagine. And I also made her eyes look a little bit different from the other ones. They have a more goddess type of look to them. In her old design, I really didn't hammer home the fact that she was African American, and that was my mistake. So I decided to lean more into her African traits as best as I could without her having a nose. I gave her a long afro, I gave her some edges, and overall gave her big eyelashes and lips that would better define the fact that she is African American. Because of the corification and the fact that she was a ghost when she fell in, she has a weaker sight than Core Frisk. She can't see all the multiverse without her being in terrible pain. Yes, though she's immortal and cannot die and will heal instantly when something stabs her, she still has pain receptives. And because of that, she tends to try to avoid looking out into the multiverse as best she can, or else her head will hurt and feel like it's going to explode. It won't, and if it does, it would rebuild and slowly regenerate. However, it's not really fun, and it's quite painful to have that happen anyways. So she avoids it as best she can and tends to just extend her reach in the current AU that she's in. She also doesn't get along with Core Frisk, even though she wants to. The two are enemies, which will be expanded on more in the Omega Timeline chapter that drops after the ElseWhere one. You can see hints of it in chapter 2, where they do discuss Core Frisk, and player gets angry and leaves the room. I want to clarify this before ending off with Corar, that Corar does not belong to me, ElseWhere as a concept does not belong to me, and though Corar is very different from her original source, she is still not my creation. All the credit goes to Barnacle Girl. However, the characters in this specific ElseWhere do belong to me, besides one, and we'll get into him now. Player, otherwise known as Underplayer. I'm sure everyone in the multiverse has heard of him, and the reason why I'm using he/him is because in his original story, he was described as a boy. However, his original story was in Chinese, and there could have been a translation error, especially since Frisk and Corar were also used with he/him pronouns. However, since player isn't exactly a Frisk or Corar and is instead an OC, and technically a real-life person put into the game, I decided to keep the fact that he is a boy because of the whole entire kid puts himself inside the game. In his old design, you could not tell this kid was a Tumblr user in 2015. Yes, that's canon. He had a blog in RoseVerse before he eventually put himself inside the game. So I decided to really hammer home the usual Tumblr emo boy fit, because that's what he was used to during the time. When player put himself inside the game at 14 years old, he put a sliver of his soul from the real world inside the components. Because of that, his real-life body did collapse in the real world and die. He is unable to return to the real world because he has no body to really reside in. It's gone. He is now player. So I will not be speaking much about his past unless you go to my Tumblr and ask, as his original name in life is forgotten to him. Player, after realizing he was putting his friends in the underground through turmoil because he wanted his happy ending, realized that the code was never going to allow him to exist. So instead, he left them alone and he went out into the multiverse and became like an oracle trickster figure. He didn't really care for anything. He liked playing around and messing with Core Frisk, Error, and other gods. No one really respected him in the god ranking because of this. He wasn't really seen as one. However, they're still scared of him due to the fact that he is very strong with his coding and that he knows almost everything about them. When he met Corar, she was an anomaly, even canon into RoseVerse. There are no mentions of her in the general multiverse as she is a RoseVerse specific creation, so he was naturally intrigued by her. He knew that his multiverse was different from the other ones, and so he wanted to be involved in the one thing he's never seen before. However, he got too attached to Wally and Corar when he realized how kind they were and how much they made him feel loved. He wasn't being used just for his power, and also for what he could see. They loved him for him, and they couldn't really recognize the whole fourth wall thing because he didn't know anything about them. So there was an equal footing for all of them. Naturally, he became very protective of ElseWhere, not because he actually cared about the concept, but because he cared about Corar and Wally's goals. Because of that, he became basically the guard dog of ElseWhere. Player is canonically second in command. To finish off with Player, I do want to say that the typical calculating and calm player that you see in Underplayer is not how he is in RoseVerse. He's very blunt, he's very harsh and mean, has a short fuse, a lot like Error in some way, but is very soft with the people he cares about, which is 2 people. Besides that, you're going to see him as a very standoffish type of guy. However, if you're Corar or Wally, you will see him be very affectionate and kind, which you can see in Chapter 2 after he fights with Corar. But you might be wondering, who's Wally, and why are they the third in command? Wally undeniably is me and Barnacle's favorite character in ElseWhere. I know you're not supposed to have a bias, but he is genuinely amazing. He uses he/they pronouns, and he's also a blacksmith, and he was the first Frisk or person to ever be brought into ElseWhere, the first person that Corar was able to save. You might be wondering, how is Wally still alive? How the hell is he still here and 14 years old forever? Because of the Neverland effect, Wally is forever 14 years old mentally and physically. They do this because they want to help Corar and always wanted to repay her for her kindness, but also he did not want to leave her behind and eventually grow old. So he remains as the third in command. Before Player, he was second in command. However, Wally is mute. He uses sign language to communicate. Because of that, he wasn't fully able to stand up for Corar in a lot of things. It made him really sad because even though he was mute and used sign language to speak out, he tended to keep to himself a lot of the time as well. He's not unable to talk. He just chooses not to. He has no reason to, and he never will in the story unless it really requires it and he can't use his hands. But he won't be saying much when he does. When Player came into the picture and actually started to show a lot of care for Corar, he willingly stepped away from being in second command to let Player be able to speak out and actually defend Corar properly. Wally was actually the one to build up a lot of ElseWhere. Player helped out near the end for more scientific things and electricity-based things, but with Wally's building capabilities, he quite literally built most of the old buildings in ElseWhere. Without him, ElseWhere wouldn't be as structurally sound. He has a little blacksmith in the basement of their shared house. Yes, these 3 share a house. And that's where he gets up to most of his projects so he could help out ElseWhere. Even though he has the Neverland effect, he still can leave ElseWhere. He won't age unless he's just out of ElseWhere for longer than a year, because then his body will actually start to age and mature over that year. But if he's gone for just a couple of hours, which he's able to do with the power of Player's codes, he collects a lot of supplies for ElseWhere and usually does most of the supply runs for different type of scientific discoveries and such. Though he's very quiet, he's one of the most empathetic characters in ElseWhere. He's the one keeping Player and Corar afloat, and he genuinely just wants his best friends to be happy and healthy. All he wants is safety for them. He doesn't really have any attachment to the other characters. He spends his time mostly in the blacksmithing, in the basement, and when he isn't in there, he's usually accompanying Corar around ElseWhere and being her guide and also helper. Besides that, you don't really see much of him unless you're close with him, but he's still very essential to the plot, and we love him very dearly. We love you, Wally, our poly, bisexual, non-binary king. You might be wondering now what type of programs ElseWhere has exactly for therapy. Well, they have multiple. However, the story focuses specifically on the age group of 10 to 15 years old. Each program is sectioned into age brackets, and it's also dependent on how much help and assistance you need from the trauma you faced in your AU. These sections do need people over them, though, to actually help keep the kids who are murderers in check and also feel comfortable and safe. One of these people that we see is Eliza, the head of the 10 to 14 unit, and it's also one of the heads in general of the therapy clinic. She does a lot of the paperwork, medical checkups, is an emotional support for a lot of the children who can't really speak up in therapy classes, and overall is someone that Corar can lean on for discussions about the children and their progress in therapy. She's from a horror-filled AU and faced a lot of trauma because of that. Her father, with his last bit of sanity, tried to keep her in line by constantly threatening her and mentally manipulating her and being mentally abusive. He never put his hands on her, but he was very desperate to keep her steady and in the house away from all the chaos that he tore her down multiple times to make her unconfident and make her not want to leave. Of course, this would make any child, specifically her at 15, want to leave. And the day that she did, he followed after her and lost the last bit of his sanity. He chased her down in order to try to eat her, but Corar managed to swoop in and save her before he could. I want to clarify that her father did not want to do this. He did not want to actually hurt her. He completely lost himself and there was no going back, which is why Corar could not take him with her. When Corar takes humans specifically out of AUs, the core codes of the AU will start to crumble in on itself. So he wasn't in misery very long before he calmly and painlessly fizzled out into codes. However, this trauma is still very strong in Liza, and she stayed a lot of her time in the last age bracket program trying to heal from this. She's 18 now and is able to have a steady job this time. However, she does smoke as a comfort and dyes her hair and does messy makeup in order to try to cope with everything that happened. She's still on her own healing journey and has private therapy now as an adult. However, she has no reason and no wants to leave ElseWhere in the near future like a lot of the children do. So she's staying and she's helping Corar out. However, because Liza is not a fighter, she does need help, specifically with these violent children. It's not the children's fault, it's the trauma they faced. However, they still need someone to keep them in line so they don't hurt others or themselves. And that person is Dakota. Dakota doesn't come from a typical AU that a lot of the Undertale creation might know. They come from something called Frisklovania. If you've seen any videos of Frisk having their theme mixed with Sans, that's what I'm talking about. But specifically, they come from an AU in this video, where Frisk took the powers and the souls of Sans and Pyrus, they willingly gave it up by the way, to defeat the player. Dakota managed to do this in their AU, and Corar came in and saved them from a world of isolation forever. Now, they are really strong. They're not immortal, but they have the power of a human soul and Sans and Papyrus's respectful powers. Karma plays a big role with a lot of the kids that they have to help out with. In Dakota's old design, I didn't feel like they really looked older than the other children. I mean, they were 18 and were supposed to have a big age gap with a lot of the children, and they didn't look it. They also were supposed to be chubby, and if you remember my horror days, you remember I used to have big problems with that. However, I fixed them up. I gave them a bit of a chubbiness and also made them a little beefy. I originally was going to show that more with sleeveless top, but that didn't really suit them much, so I decided to just cover their arms and call it a day. They wear Papyrus's scarf and Sans' old hoodie, and under it they are still wearing their original sweater, or a re-knitted version of it since they have grown out of it. They got rescued by Corar when they were 14 years old. Once they actually got through their 2 programs, they also decided to stay in ElseWhere and basically help, are also the program that Eliza is over. That time in a lot of children's life can be a lot with hormones, especially if they're murderous children. So Dakota knew that this is the part that they needed to be over, to keep these children in line and to keep them from harming anybody, including themselves. With their combined power and their increased level of karma, they're able to overpower quite literally any kid, that walks into that building. The only one stronger than them is Player, but Player's immortal, so that's saying a lot. Because they work in this program, they did become friends with Liza over the years that they were also trying to heal. They did join ElseWhere a year before Liza did, and even so, they still met and became friends. However, they don't have the most healthy dynamic, as Liza finds them quite annoying and lazy, while Dakota doesn't really put much of a fight up, considering their own insecurities. They don't have the most healthy relationship, but it's all that they have. Those two have seen the worst of the worst, and they cling to each other, because who else are they going to cling to? There's not a lot of other adults in ElseWhere, and if they are, they're a lot older than them. So, they take what they can get. However, they don't tend to like a certain newcomer in ElseWhere, which we'll get into now. Hart is one of the newer members of the ElseWhere party. Specifically, Hart is in the program as well, trying to heal from his trauma of his AU. He is very trigger happy, has horrible PTSD, and tends to react to things like a feral animal. He is what you would expect to see in these types of environments. A murderous child that used fighting and killing as a way to defend themselves and to also fuel their level of violence so they wouldn't be so scared anymore. In Hart's old design, I didn't think that they were creepy enough, so I decided to give them a very unsettling stare that really enhances the PTSD that they have. Hart is not a good person. However, in RoseVerse, I don't go by good or bad actions. I specifically wrote it so people are people who do bad things and good things. They're people, not good or bad people. Hart is an example of this, who is very complicated. He's 14 and already addicted to smoking and drinking. He had to in order to keep up the pain of a genocidal AU. He also has a full vessel human body. He's not a ghost. He was before, but managed to actually take over the human's body and fully design it to his own. So now he's back and alive, even if he doesn't really want to be. Hart is very vindictive, rude, cruel, manipulative, but he's also a scared, hurt child who lashes out and doesn't want to accept help because he doesn't think he deserves it. Hart is one of the most complicated characters that I've written, mainly because even when I was writing him, I was not a big fan of him. However, I knew that even though I wasn't a big fan of him, he still deserved help, and Corar would see that too, even if I couldn't. Because no matter what you've gone through and what you've done as a child, you still have the capability of doing better, and Hart is an example of that. I ask in future chapters with Hart that you go into his actions with an open mind and keeping what I said in mind as well. He's a very complex character and I want people to be able to recognize that. He's just like everybody else. He needs love and he needs help. However, despite all this, he's still not a good friend at all to one of the newer members of ElseWhere. Orchid's design didn't change much from the original, besides changing up their sleeves and their top a bit. Actually changed their hair a bit too to make more sense, because before you couldn't tell if it was buns or messy or whatever the sake, so I gave them kind of more toga-inspired buns, because they do tend to act a lot like that. Orchid was a dust-tail frisk that was saved by Corar after being stuck in an endless loop. No matter what they did, no matter what route they chose, they could not get out. It would always reset back to the beginning. Because of this, their frustration got the better of them and they began to attack and kill, ending up in a dust-tail timeline. They became addicted to the sense of something new and wanting new interactions. However, because they were so young, they quickly became terrified of their dust sands. He was brutal, he was mean, and he made their life a living hell. So she wanted out. Corar was told this by Player, and so Corar was able to go and save her from her AU, thus making the AU collapse in on itself after she left. Orchid actually really does want to get better. She is also addicted to alcohol, as she had to have other coping mechanisms while in her AU. She secretly does want to improve. She wants to be a better person, and she never really wanted to kill in the first place. However, she instantly latches onto Hart, who is not a good influence, and tries to drag her down multiple times, so she doesn't get better. Because this is the first friend she's had in a very long time, she sticks with it, and they develop into a very unhealthy codependent friendship where neither party wants to let go of the other. She also isn't a good person. She did a lot of bad, and she tends to be actually really rude to people as well. She's not innocent in her friendship with Hart. Neither one of them is. Both of them are at fault. Both of them are not good people, but they're trying to do better. even if one of them is less inclined to than the other. She is also unlabeled and non-binary. I didn't put it on her chart, but she is also 14 years old. And yeah, that's Orchid. Thank you all for watching this video. This took a very long time to make. I hope you enjoyed learning about ElseWhere, and I hope because you know a little bit more about the dynamics and how it works, you'll be a lot more interested in what's to come in the next chapter and the next animatic. Please do follow my Tumblr. Again, I love getting asked, I love talking to you all, and I hope to see you there. We're almost at 4,000 subscribers. I'm praying this video gets us to that mark. I'm really excited to be able to celebrate that milestone. I've been on YouTube for many years now, so if we ever get to reach that, I'll freak out. I'll be so ecstatic. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!